or decentralized to serve the ideas we espouse in rule of law. So you will see in the context could be shared very interestingly if you illustrate the Van Damme song, maximum happiness or maximum people. What is that? The same implication, perhaps different words. So how to maximize the public good in the whole society? That could be an ultimate point which the public administration and administrable culminates. However, it could not remain as such honorable independence. So one concept from Constitution could infuse and interacts to eclipse in some places. So any ideas for maximizing of happiness, greatest number of with maximum happiness, greatest number of people with maximum happiness, could not be sustained in some cases. We have any fundamental interest constitutionally embedded and kept respected of century and in historical lesson and tradition. So the contrast in exercise and questions is very insightful. Second, how is the freedom contract limitation, regulatory power, under the due process clause similar to and different from takings clause limitation on regulatory power? So the United States also has one important provision named the contract clause. So the state power could not obstruct the contract concluded between the private parties and between private party and state. In some cases, the contract may be distinguished in quality so that the contract could be go public in nature to be adapted or moderated. However, that is one essence in ideal to shape a freer society and freer economy in the United States. So that could be in comparison with takings clause. Freedom of contract, however, would be more amenable to regulatory power in this modern administrative. And typically in civil law traditions, you will see the scope of new dealings and perspective, which supersedes any private prerogative in a contract. Yellow door contract is one example you may learn in contract course. So take it or leave it. The manner and behavior of large enterprises in modern state would fairly arbitrary in some sense and derogate the decency of a consumers. So that poses a challenge and question to the modern preserve of contract law. That is one example, and you will see many civil provisions in Korean civil code, for example, and could be enforced in mandate. So the mandatory clause would have increase, would increase in decades and centuries. So, for example, what a small claims of less, lease or interest could be disputed in other forum or court proceeding, and many duties and obligations were set forth in Korean Civil Code, which could not be derogated or dishonored by the contract parties. And also, typically, you focus may be given to unionism, for example. So the labor contract is now heavily reshaped as influenced by new dealings, new deals in the United States, and a public virtue or powers to protect the working class in the society could pay a high profit or rate of a public intervention. So you will see the call to regulate this area, labor union and representation in the workplace as a matter of law, and the right to negotiate, and even the right to strike or foreclosure of workplace, closure of workplace, which could be an option that could be exercised by employer. The takings clause in rather subtlety could be viewed as more fundamental. So the regulatory power would have a limited ambit to intervene. And however, in modern urban zoning or other public programs, the quasi nature of a taking could be disputed in the court, as we consider. So, in the third, we review the rise and fall of the due process protection of property rights, started over 100 years ago and ending in FDR's New Deal in the 1930s. It also suggested that the recent takings clause cases awarding money in compensation for regulatory limits on the use of real estate may indicate the conservative swing back in the pro-property direction. So the political atmosphere and their procurabilities would exercise some wedge-out influence to shift the paradigm in under some background or others. So that is the point to be monitored if you're civic analyst or others. So often pundit of national politics would argue on this kind of a concern. Then, how do you see if this is a desirable development? If the court used the case like Dolan as a model for all administrable decisions, how might administrative policy making change? Might become more cumbersome and costly to taxpayers, for example. Justice Stevens' dissent will help you think about this question. Similarly, how might the recent takings jurisprudence impact the public right doctrine articulated in NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steele, decided in 1937? So actually, the issue would be evolutionary and could be influenced from many factors. Typically, the character of a ruling party would step in any seriously to deal with the question. Okay, let's take a force. The Iowa Freedom to Farm statute takes away the ability of neighbors or hog farmers to recover damages, erosion, when they are offended by the noise that smells from hog hounds next door. Then you would be advised to make the argument that this law is an illegal taking of property right and takings clause. So it will take some time to meditate on this error. So I mentioned the political influence that could be excessive in some circumstances, however, could not be stuck in normal conditions. So they also share some national ethos in common and have similar viewpoints about the issue. However, they could diverge. And typically, you will see the spirit in a philosophical holding or tendency among the Supreme Court justices. So they could often receive a public attention very seriously, since many social and economic issues fall within their authority. How to approach and frame important issues in any dispositive way could make a extent of impact on the society. And also, however, you will see some strengths in the judicial branch that they operate within the principle of state decisis. Therefore, the president could not be overturned on any unfounded ground. So, in order to recast in any official terms the president, then there would be absolute conditions to alter the decision. The federal judges could make his own law if any adequate president could guide him to resolve the case. However, often they dispose the case by way of analysis and inference, and they also apply inductive reasoning to reach a conclusion. They like to find any adequate and most appropriate sheet of authority to obtain this case. They may fail to find any exact authority available. Then he or she could shape his opinion, which could be another precedent to guide the subsequent court jurisdictions. And now take the fifth. Just Scalia's dissent in Misrata versus United States mounts a sophisticated political argument. Be sure to study closely. Would the late Professor Yaffe have agreed with Scalia? What exactly is it that makes this delegation excessive in Scalia's eyes? What does it mean by this sentence? The power to make law at issue here is not ancillary, but quite naked. Is Scalia worried why most institutions in government take to make laws simultaneously feedback loops that tell them when the rules work well and when they need a changing? There is no such loop in this case. Then, do you agree with Scalia that the Sentencing Commission's rule should fall because the Commission lacks such a feedback loop, or Judge Levanthor's formula for acceptable delegation quoted in this chapter, adequate justification for the misread majority position. So feedback actually is an important mechanism to communicate and about sharing among interested parties. So that is a very important tool to reach a public consensus about issues. It should be difficult and striking. And they can form a platform to share. So it's lacking seriously deprave the purpose of research and the expected way of interaction among the governmental branches and the agencies, or in this case, Federal Commission, Supreme Court, and Congress would come in as multiple actors. So many questionable issues could be complicated. How to operate our constitutional mandate. And Justice Scalia's viewpoint, as commented in the last class, include some perspective, some caution to echo. How do you consider? And we also need to review three illustrations, as I mentioned in the last class. You now on chapter 2, the origin and meaning of administrative law, and you know the case name. What is that? Morgan versus United States, and Goldberg and Matthews. These three cases are important authority in terms of case law, which we could learn the court holdings and principles in addressing the social welfare, benefit, for example, disabled benefit, the social benefit for the disabled, or the deprived class in terms of